Field reports, archaeological sondes, and pick-feed sweeps commonly begin the same way. A quiet catalogue of fragments, ship logs, and Imperial assessments that, when assembled, map the rise of a people whose self-image and outward conduct diverge sharply from the majority of the galaxy's intelligent species. Sensors brought back settlement plans and hydroponic schematics. Recovered codices recorded disciplined battalion formations and the repeated appearance of a five-fold social rubric that arranged labour, diplomacy and warfare into separate interlocking roles. Eyewitness fragments, Imperial patrol logs, merchant transcripts and smuggler journals consistently mention a single rhetorical core spoken by the Tau themselves, the greater good. When the patchwork of empirical traces is read together, it resolves into a political and cultural entity that expanded from modest star systems in the Eastern Fringe into a coordinated, technologically driven polity. Contemporary and archival sources concur that the polity's political architecture is caste-based and oligarchic in practice, while presenting itself as communal and goal-oriented in rhetoric. Ethereals, figures described in both narrative accounts and recovered administrative records, appear repeatedly as the centralizing authority in origin tales and early unification narratives. Those accounts attribute to the Ethereals the mediation of internecine conflicts during the species' formative period and the promulgation of the greater good as a guiding philosophy that superseded tribal divisions. The formation of a centralized administration and the subsequent deployment of coordinated expansion efforts are documented as consequences of this ideological shift, rather than as simple military conquest. Physical descriptions across the same sources emphasize a broadly humanoid morphology, with notable divergences from baseline human physiology. Their lower extremities end in cloven, hoof-like structures. Facial anatomy includes a central facial slit rather than a protruding human nose, and their integument is described as thickened, grey-blue and leathery. Vision is characterized as capable across an extended spectrum into infrared and ultraviolet ranges, while olfaction is situated in structures within the oral cavity. These anatomical features are repeatedly connected to the environmental history of their homeworlds: dry plains, variable gravity regimes, and the selective pressures of a species that expanded across multiple planetary niches. Population estimates in primary public compilations remain necessarily broad because canonical materials rarely publish census-level details. Scholarly summaries and consolidated references describe the Tau as a young, rapidly expanding species with a demographic profile concentrated in organized septs and spheres of expansion. Expansionary phases are chronicled as discrete spheres, in which coordinated colonization and military projection produce new septs and client populations. These spheres are catalogued as primary phases in the polity's growth and are associated with distinct technological improvements in propulsion and logistics that allowed more distant systems to be incorporated into a single administrative framework. The precise head counts are not authoritative in open sources, but the narrative pattern is consistent. Growth by coordinated colonization, strategic absorption of alien clients, and the creation of administrative nodes that managed both production and military recruitment. Statements about average height and body mass require cautious framing because published material seldom offers universal biometric tables. The compiled references note trend differences by caste rather than a single species-wide metric. Fire Caste members tend toward a stockier, more muscular build, attributed to their origin in higher gravity settlements. Earth Caste personnel are frequently characterized as shorter and stout, reflecting labor-oriented physiologies. Water and Air Castes are described as taller and more svelte, with the Air Caste in particular showing elongated skeletal proportions consistent with long-term life aboard low-gravity or void-borne environments. Generalized summaries therefore present the Tau as roughly human-sized on average, with caste-specific variants. Many documents place typical adult heights in a range comparable to humans, but often slightly shorter overall, while noting that the Air Caste may exceed typical human stature in specific populations. Sources converge on the qualitative conclusion that Tau are lighter in muscle mass and less adapted to protracted close-quarters physical combat when compared to baseline human soldiers, a point repeatedly emphasized in military assessments. Recruitment and social formation follow a life cycle tightly bound to the caste matrix. From earliest ethnographic reconstructions, individuals are integrated into caste roles that determine training, vocation, and social mobility in practice. The Fire Caste receives rigorous martial training from infancy, producing disciplined infantry cadres. The Earth Caste develops engineering and technical expertise. The Water Caste cultivates diplomatic and administrative skills. The Air Caste specializes in fleet service and piloting, and the Ethereal Caste functions as ideological and political leadership. Field dispatches and recovered training manuals emphasize that recruitment combines formal instruction with ritualized induction, conditioning individuals to prioritize collective aims. Administrative records indicate a formal nomenclature for ranks and honors within each caste, along with designated roles for veterans, specialists, and commanders. Technology and weapons form a central axis of the Tau State's strategic capabilities. Canonical technical summaries credit the Earth Caste with rapid advances in miniaturized power systems, sensor arrays, guided munitions, and materials science, leading to an array of systems that emphasize long-range precision engagement over brute mechanical resilience. Battlesuits, a class of powered warframes, epitomize this engineering focus. Varieties range from light stealth units optimized for infiltration to heavy support platforms that concentrate anti-armor firepower. Battlesuits are described by technical exegesis as constructed from advanced, lightweight alloys and incorporating integrated sensor, propulsion, and life support systems that allow single pilots to deliver effects comparable to armored vehicles. The doctrinal implication demonstrated across after-action reports is clear. Technological leverage replaces numerical brute force for many Tau formations, and maintenance, supply, and integration of drones and support systems are as decisive as the individual pilot's proficiency. Other elements of Tau war gear mirror the same design philosophy. Infantry fielded pulse rifles, marker light systems, and ranges of specialized launcher types that prioritize range, rate of fire, and synchronized target acquisition. Unmanned systems, target drones, recon units, and support drones are integrated directly into small unit tactics, allowing squads to extend their situational awareness and deliver overlapping fields of precision fire. Vehicle classes are described as optimized for coordinated maneuvers rather than independent endurance. Transport and support craft are commonly built to operate within a networked battle group, relying on guided munitions and electronic sensor fusion to sustain offensive output. Engineers' treatises collected in public archives repeatedly emphasize the logistical demands of sustaining such an integrated technological apparatus, noting that the Empire's operational reach depends on supply nodes and the protected movement of components between septs and starbases. Logistical capabilities are often understated when observers focus solely on battlefield headlines, but compilations of campaign notes reveal a deliberate attention to supply analytics, production decentralization, and the use of allied or vassal labor to scale manufacturing capacity. Administrative dispatches and captured supply manifest point to a system that routes material production through designated Earth Caste centers and disperses specialized components across sept networks for final assembly. This pattern reduces single-point vulnerability and allows rapid reconfiguration of production lines in response to losses or to scale up specific battlefield systems such as additional battlesuits or drone swarms. Analysts summarizing these materials frame the Empire as able to project power reliably within its spheres when logistics are intact, while also noting that disruption of supply corridors can critically degrade operational tempo. Field-level descriptions of distinctive traits emphasize behavior and doctrine as much as anatomy or kit. Tau military doctrine advocates engagement at maximal effective ranges, systematic target prioritization. Repeated observations underline an aversion to protracted melee combat and a cultural preference for technological mitigation over personal sacrifice. Courage is framed as professional effectiveness rather than sacrificial heroics. doctrine and social expectation combine to create units that display high cohesion, disciplined fire control, and a heavy reliance on combined arms nodes anchored by battlesuits and drone arrays. The interface between civilian life and the military sphere is neither seamless nor trivial. Civilian roles are structured around the needs of an expanding polity. Urban planners, engineers, and logistics managers are high-status positions within the Earth and Water Castes because their work directly supports expansion and stability. Rituals and public ceremonies tend to formalize the ethos of collective duty. They reinforce caste identities and mark the transition points of training, deployment, and veteran recognition. When observers from other polities attempt to compress Tau social life into singular categories, they often err by overemphasizing military aspects or by treating the greater good as a simple slogan. In primary archival reconstructions, the greater good is inseparable from administrative practice. It functions as both a normative ethic and as a practical rubric that determines resource distribution, conflict resolution, and the incorporation of allied species. Instances of client species being integrated under negotiated terms, or alternatively by forceful annexation, recur across expansion narratives. The legal and bureaucratic apparatus that governs such incorporations is described in recovered documents as methodical and aimed at reducing friction in governance, even where coercion and disparity of power remain clear in the empirical record. Behavioral instincts on the battlefield reflect decades of doctrine and training. Units display a marked preference for calculated maneuver, overlapping fire and technological redundancy. Commanders emphasize synchronized engagement windows where marker lights and drone suppression allow heavy weapons to engage with maximal lethality. When pressed into close quarters, Tau units habitually attempt to re-establish standoff ranges or to use mechanized elements to create overwatch corridors. When neither is possible, recorded losses rise precipitously. The combined effect of cultural training, physiological traits, and an equipment philosophy built around range and precision creates a pattern of combat performance that is consistent across multiple documented engagements. High efficiency under controlled conditions, greater vulnerability under chaotic close-quarters disruption. Transmissions retrieved from Imperial observer networks and archived within Mechanicus databanks often begin with brief references to the harmony of the Tau. The phrase, at first appearing rhetorical, later proved to correspond to measurable patterns of civic behavior and administrative regularity that define the internal architecture of the Tau Empire. Unlike the anarchic or feudal hierarchies seen across much of the galaxy, the Tau social model exhibits a deliberate systemic order. Every individual, from the humblest laborer to the highest ethereal, exists within a clearly delineated lattice of function and duty. This lattice is not static in the mechanical sense, but self-correcting, designed to maintain balance among castes and to ensure that no sector of society operates entirely independent of the greater good. Civilian and military roles are intertwined but distinctly managed. A member of the Fire Caste, for instance, is not simply a soldier, they are a living instrument of state policy, conditioned to perceive warfare as a communal task rather than personal enterprise. Similarly, Earth Caste engineers view the construction of cities, ships, and battlesuits not as private industry, but as an expression of the same ethical doctrine that guides the fire warriors on the field. The Water Caste mediates between these domains, maintaining the flow of resources, information, and diplomacy, while the Air Caste ensures mobility, transporting personnel, cargo, and ideas through orbital and interstellar corridors. The Ethereals, functioning as philosophical governors and societal arbiters, rarely engage directly in production or combat, but their presence suffuses all institutions as the ideological adhesive binding the others. Daily civilian life within a typical sept world is regimented and efficient. Cities are arranged according to geometric zoning principles, with residential, industrial, and administrative districts separated yet interconnected by transit conduits. These cities, known in the archives as spires or habs, are powered by clean fusion cores and maintained through continual Earth Caste oversight. Housing units are functional rather than decorative, furnished for collective utility, and designed with modular structures to minimize waste. Citizens rise according to a strict time cycle. Work shifts are synchronized across castes to ensure maximum coordination between production, transport, and defense networks. Recreation exists, but it is measured, organized around communal sports or tactical simulations that reinforce cooperation and reflex discipline. Personal indulgence is viewed not as a right but as a resource, allocated in proportion to service and contribution. The Tau concept of lifestyle cannot be separated from ethics. In their recorded moral lexicon, the individual is an extension of the collective. The greater good is not merely an ideal, but an active regulatory system embedded into law, education, and religion. To act in self-interest at the expense of one's caste or sept is considered irrational, even pathological. This ideological conditioning begins early. Juvenile education facilities, often shared across castes for the first developmental years, introduce the principles of cooperation, efficiency, and duty before physical or vocational training begins. At adolescence, the caste designation determines the remainder of instruction, with curricula tailored to occupational aptitude. Ritual behavior among the Tau reflects this ethic of discipline and unity. While lacking the mystical ornamentation characteristic of Imperial faiths, they do maintain a cycle of civic ceremonies. These rituals are often commemorations of founding events, collective victories, or the induction of new members into a caste function. Ethereal-led gatherings emphasize collective silence, synchronized gestures, and the repetition of brief oaths affirming loyalty to the greater good. There are no priests in the traditional sense, but the Ethereals perform the same social function, presiding over ceremonies, issuing benedictions, and interpreting the moral implications of law and war. The caste hierarchy remains the central pillar of the Tau Empire's social structure. Ethereals occupy the apex, and although their exact biological or psychological distinctions remain uncertain, field accounts note that their presence exerts an inexplicable influence on the other castes. Whether through pheromonal control, subtle psychological conditioning, or sheer charisma remains debated. Regardless, the effect is measurable. Obedience and trust increase markedly in the proximity of an ethereal, and units deprived of such leadership often experience moral degradation. Beneath them, the four foundational castes each fulfill specific societal and biological functions. The Fire Caste, or Shaz, represents the martial arm. These individuals are raised on worlds with higher gravity and more austere environments, conditions that produce muscular density and a hardy cardiovascular system. Their education is strictly militarized, ranging from pulse weapon maintenance to squad-level tactics and coordination with drone assets. Service continues until age or injury precludes combat effectiveness, after which veterans are often reassigned to training or advisory positions. Honor within the Fire Caste is measured by discipline, not by reckless valor. Retreat and regrouping are viewed as tactical obligations, not cowardice. The Earth Caste, or Theo, embodies the technical and industrial backbone. Members of this caste are methodical and pragmatic, their culture one of constant iteration and improvement. They inhabit massive foundries, shipyards, and research spires, designing everything from urban infrastructure to advanced plasma reactors. Innovation among the Earth Caste operates within strict guidelines. No project is pursued for personal acclaim, only for measurable benefit to the collective. The best engineers are often promoted into oversight councils that coordinate resource management between sept. These councils act as the Empire's equivalent of an industrial parliament. Their debates focused entirely on logistics, production quotas, and energy efficiency. The Water Caste, or Poor, serves as the diplomatic and administrative network of the Empire. Physically adapted to lower gravity and aquatic environments, they are sleek, silver-blue in complexion, and gifted with social dexterity uncommon among other castes. Their speech patterns are modulated and persuasive, trained in negotiation, linguistic analysis, and propaganda. They operate embassies across the Empire and are the primary interface between the Tau and alien species. It is through the Water Caste that the Empire's expansion appears benign, framed as a partnership rather than conquest. Records show that even when absorption is coercive, the diplomatic framing remains consistent. Service to the greater good is depicted as liberation from chaos and inefficiency. The Air Caste, or core, operates primarily off-world, managing orbital installations, transport fleets, and interstellar communications. Their elongated bodies and hollow bones are the result of millennia spent in low-gravity habitats. They are the unseen arteries of the Empire, maintaining the logistical chains that allow rapid deployment of troops and goods across the spheres of expansion. Despite their physical distance from surface politics, the Air Caste's control over transportation grants them quiet but profound influence. Their councils liaise directly with Earth Caste engineers and Water Caste administrators to schedule fleet production and manage trade convoys. Over all these groups stands the Ethereal Caste, or Aon, whose authority is rarely challenged. Their leadership structure is hierarchical but opaque. Few documents specify exact ranks beyond general honorifics such as Aunva or Aunshi. It is believed that councils of Ethereals govern each sept, while an overarching conclave, possibly planetary or interstellar in scope, coordinates empire-wide policy. Their decisions determine the deployment of Fire Caste forces, the distribution of resources among Earth Caste manufacturers, and the diplomatic tone adopted by the Water Caste. Ethereals seldom explain their reasoning, and their decrees are accepted without resistance. The result is a system of governance that is both efficient and potentially fragile. Total obedience produces coherence, but if the ethereal hierarchy were ever disrupted, the intercaste harmony might collapse entirely. Social mobility among the castes is virtually non-existent. Genetic, cultural, and psychological conditioning reinforce the notion that one's caste is both destiny and identity. Cross-caste marriages are rare and socially discouraged, though not explicitly forbidden. Cooperation between castes is constant, but each maintains its traditions and symbols. Fire Caste enclaves display banners of sept honor and unit lineage. Earth Caste districts exhibit production quotas and innovation plaques. Water Caste embassies host multilingual inscriptions proclaiming unity through the greater good. The absence of personal heraldry underscores a collective mindset. Accomplishments belong to the group, not to the individual. Tao ethics are pragmatic and utilitarian. Decisions are evaluated through a calculus of overall benefit. A single life, or even a city, may be sacrificed if it preserves the long-term stability of the empire. There is no moral vocabulary for individual guilt in this context, only responsibility to function. Compassion exists, but it is structured, expressed through ensuring another's utility rather than emotional consolation. Mercy may be shown if it strengthens loyalty. Cruelty may be applied if it restores order. From an external human perspective, this moral system appears cold, but internally it is consistent, rational, and remarkably effective at suppressing dissent. The leadership structure that emerges from these principles is both vertical and networked. At the planetary level, governance is administered through sept councils, composed primarily of Water and Earth Caste representatives who oversee civilian affairs and report to local Ethereals. Each council regulates education, infrastructure, and production. The Fire Caste maintains its own chain of command, parallel but subordinate to the Ethereals. Strategic directives flow downward from the central ethereal conclave, interpreted and implemented by caste specialists. There is no concept of political opposition. Debate occurs only within sanctioned limits to optimize policy execution, not to challenge it. Communication between septs is sustained by the Air Caste's interstellar relay networks. These orbital hubs transmit encrypted data bursts through messenger drones, or faster-than-light communication beacons. The process is decentralized to minimize vulnerability. Each sept retains sufficient autonomy to govern day-to-day operations, yet every decision ultimately aligns with the greater good doctrine. The absence of a singular charismatic leader, replaced instead by distributed ethereal councils, ensures continuity but obscures accountability. If corruption exists, it is concealed within layers of administrative precision. The internal equilibrium of the Tau Empire depends on ideological reinforcement rather than coercion. Dissenters are rare. When they appear, their fate is often quietly resolved through re-education or reassignment. Records captured by the Imperium mention the term Montau, translated loosely as the Time of Terra, referring to the species' pre-unification age of anarchy. This historical memory functions as a deterrent. Any deviation from the greater good is framed as a return to chaos. Thus, obedience is not enforced by fear of punishment alone, but by existential fear of regression. To an external observer, the Tau Empire may appear sterile in its efficiency, yet within it lies a form of quiet contentment. Citizens find meaning in function, comfort in coordination, and identity in contribution. Even art and leisure reflect the collective spirit. Murals depict cooperation between castes, symphonies are composed mathematically to evoke harmony, and literature glorifies service to the Empire's expansion. It is a civilization that measures greatness not in individual heroics, but in the precision of its system. The absence of personal ambition is not seen as a deficiency, but as a triumph of social engineering. Pict feeds obtained from multiple engagements across the Eastern Fringe present a consistent portrait of the Tau command structure. Precise, adaptive, and remarkably unified despite its reliance on a limited number of central figures. Within the Tau Empire, leadership is never synonymous with personal glorification. To command is to serve the greater good through strategic excellence and doctrinal fidelity. Yet, even within such an ideologically constrained system, certain individuals have emerged whose influence extends beyond their assigned sept or campaign sphere. Among the most frequently cited names is that of Commander Puretide, regarded by both the Tau and their adversaries as the foundational architect of modern Tau military doctrine. Puretide's lifetime precedes the major expansionist waves of the Empire, yet his teachings endure as the basis for all strategic education within the Fire Caste academies. His principal achievement lies not in territorial conquest but in codification. He translated the fluid principles of Tau philosophy into practical doctrines of warfare. Under his instruction, strategies such as the Kauyon, the patient hunter, and the Montka, the killing blow, became formalized into the Empire's tactical lexicon. The former emphasizes lure and entrapment, the latter decisive and concentrated assault. Puretide's own campaigns were characterized by restraint and precision. Rather than rely on overwhelming firepower, he emphasized coordination between units and flexibility in command hierarchies. The Puretide Tactical School, established in his name, continues to produce generations of commanders who study simulated replays of his battles down to minute decision points. Puretide's neural patterns were recorded through advanced bioimaging technology shortly before his death, later used to create limited AI constructs known as Puretide engrams. These digital echoes serve as instructors for new cadres, transmitting his analytical methodology across centuries. Despite his death, Puretide's intellect remains functionally active, replicated and deployed to instruct commanders who would later become central to the Empire's expansion. From Puretide's students emerged two figures whose paths would later diverge sharply: Commander Farsight and Commander Shadowsun. Both trained under the Puretide school, both mastered its doctrines, and both embodied contrasting interpretations of their mentor's philosophy. Commander Farsight, known by his given name Oshova, is recorded as one of the most brilliant and controversial leaders in Tau history. Initially loyal to the Ethereal command structure, Farsight led numerous campaigns during the Third Sphere of Expansion. His signature operational approach fused Puretide's theoretical precision with unorthodox autonomy, emphasizing mobility, close-quarters adaptability, and independent initiative. His personal battlesuit, the UV-86 Enforcer variant, is heavily customized, equipped with modified plasma rifles, shield generators, and an experimental blade of unknown xenotechnology, later identified as the Dawn Blade. The Dawn Blade itself remains an object of speculation within both Imperial and Mechanicus archives. Reports suggest the weapon possesses regenerative or time-distorting properties, allowing its wielder to age at a decelerated rate. Whether technological, psychic, or warp-related, the mechanism remains undetermined. What is verified, however, is Farsight's apparent longevity. He has continued to command his forces centuries beyond the normal Tau lifespan. Farsight's eventual divergence from the Empire's central command marks one of the few recorded instances of Tau schism. Disillusioned with the Ethereal oversight after a prolonged and costly campaign against Orc infestations on Arkanasha, and later against human and unknown forces in the Damocles region, Farsight established an autonomous region beyond the borders of the main empire, now known as the Farsight Enclaves. Despite Imperial propaganda labelling him a rebel, captured communications suggest his loyalty remains not to personal ambition, but to a reinterpreted version of the greater good, one free from ethereal control. The Enclaves continue to operate with remarkable efficiency, maintaining Tau social order without ethereal presence. This anomaly remains a focal point of Adeptus Mechanicus study, as it implies that the Tau's cohesion, long believed dependent on ethereal guidance, may be ideological rather than biological. In contrast stands Commander Shadowsun, or Oshasera, whose loyalty to the ethereal hierarchy remains absolute. Selected by the ethereal Anva himself to lead the Third Sphere expansion, Shadowsun represents the perfection of Puretide's discipline, combined with the Ethereal's ideological purity. Her command style is defined by meticulous coordination, multi-layered stealth operations, and strategic patience. She employs advanced stealth battle suits, most notably the Avesti 22 prototype, equipped with active camouflage systems and synchronized drone networks capable of decoy projection and sensory interference. Shadowsun's campaigns exemplify the Tau's preferred model of warfare: surgical precision, controlled escalation, and avoidance of attrition. Other than confront the enemy in direct, protracted engagements, she manipulates information and terrain, forcing opponents into disadvantageous positions before delivering focused, overwhelming strikes. Her personal record during the Third Sphere expansion includes the near-total subjugation of several Imperial systems before the intervention of the Ultramarines halted further advance. Even in retreat, her forces suffered minimal casualties, a testament to the efficiency of her coordination and her strict adherence to Puretide's tactical principles. The contrast between Shadowsun's orthodoxy and Farsight's independence defines the central philosophical divide within the modern Tau military. One operates under direct ethereal supervision, maintaining the structure of obedience and ideological uniformity. The other functions without it, guided by pragmatism and empirical autonomy. Yet both share an identical root in Puretide's teachings. This duality illustrates a key behavioral tendency among the Fire Caste. When confronted with uncertainty, they seek resolution not through improvisation, but through refined adaptation of established doctrine. Other notable figures include Commander Brightsword, a contemporary and one-time ally of Farsight. Brightsword's reputation stems from his aggressive interpretation of the Montka philosophy, favouring swift, overwhelming assaults executed with mathematical precision. His campaigns demonstrated the Tau's ability to perform rapid strikes using combined arms, crisis battlesuits, hammerhead gunships, and Pathfinder reconnaissance units operating in perfect synchronization. Brightsword's eventual disappearance during the Enclave conflicts remains unclear. Some reports suggest he perished in battle, others imply he may have followed Farsight into exile. Beyond individual leaders, the Tau military system produces several elite units, distinguished by specialization and efficiency. The XV8 Crisis battlesuit teams remain the central pillar of Fire Caste mobility, capable of engaging at varying ranges through modular weapon configurations. The XV88 broadside units provide long-range anti-armor support, while the Pathfinder teams conduct advanced scouting and marker light designation to guide precision strikes. Heavy support is delivered by hammerhead gunships armed with railguns, kinetic accelerators capable of penetrating even Space Marine dreadnought armor at range. The Skyray missile defense platform complements this role, deploying seeker munitions guided by networked drones. At the apex of mechanized warfare stands the KV-128 Storm Surge, and the larger 50 104 Riptide battlesuit, both fielded during the later expansions. These towering exoframes bridge the gap between infantry-scale suits and Titan-class war engines. Unlike Imperial war machines, Tau designs emphasize balance and efficiency rather than intimidation. The Riptide's reactor core enables sustained high-energy output without catastrophic instability, allowing for extended engagements without the mechanical degradation typical of human designs. Each machine is operated by a single pilot whose neural interface links directly to the suit's systems, achieving near instantaneous response and coordination. The behavioural pattern evident across all levels of the Fire Caste reflects a species trained not for individual heroism, but for systemic precision. In combat, Tau forces exhibit remarkable composure. Their reaction to loss or uncertainty is analytical rather than emotional. Retreat is considered a maneuver, not a disgrace. Psychological analyses from captured engagements indicate low variance in morale, even under extreme pressure. This stability derives from early conditioning that eliminates the concept of personal failure. Only collective efficiency matters. When a fire warrior falls, the system compensates. The loss is quantified, logged, and adapted for future correction. Ethereals play an invisible yet decisive role in maintaining this psychological equilibrium. Their presence before battle is observed to alter the behaviour of entire cadres. Reaction times improve, coordination tightens, and post-engagement fatigue decreases. Some Imperial scholars have speculated that this effect results from low-frequency pheromonal emissions or neural resonance. Whatever its nature, the influence reinforces the behavioural consistency that defines Tau military conduct. The ethereal leadership itself operates less as command and more as calibration. Ethereals rarely dictate tactics. Instead, they provide moral framing. Their pronouncements transform warfare from an act of destruction into an act of preservation, preserving order, logic, and progress. This reframing allows even aggressive campaigns to remain consistent with Tau ethics. To the Fire Caste, combat is not violence. It is maintenance of equilibrium through necessary force. The behavioural tendencies of the Tau species extend beyond the battlefield. In daily life, they exhibit collective prioritization, minimal emotional variance, and a tendency toward procedural interaction. Their communication patterns emphasize consensus over confrontation. Arguments are rare and generally resolved through reference to doctrine or superior authority. In interspecies relations, this manifests as diplomatic patience. The Water Caste's negotiation style reflects this same behavioral core, methodical, calm, and disarmingly rational. Despite this stability, anomalies exist. Farsight's schism demonstrated that under specific conditions, prolonged isolation, ideological strain, or exposure to unknown artifacts, individual autonomy can override collective programming. The enclaves thus serve as a living contradiction within Tau behavioral design, independent, self-sustaining, and functioning without ethereal influence. Whether this indicates a hidden potential for rebellion or an evolutionary step towards self-directed agency remains debated within Mechanicus think tanks. In totality, the Tau Empire's leadership and military framework embody the same principle that guides every layer of its civilization: the greater good as both ideal and algorithm. Each commander, from Puretide's analytical rigour to Shadowsun's precision and Farsight's pragmatism, represents a variant expression of that formula. Their machines, the battlesuits, gunships, drones, and exoframes, are physical manifestations of the same logic: efficiency without waste, coordination without emotion, purpose without deviation. Where human generals pursue glory, Tau commanders pursue optimization. Where Imperial armies rely on faith and fury, Tau cadres rely on data and doctrine. Even rebellion, in their case, assumes a disciplined form. The Tau are not reckless innovators nor mindless conformists. They are a civilization attempting to transform warfare itself into an exact science. In this pursuit, their leaders stand as both instruments and anomalies, proof that even within engineered harmony, individuality can emerge, quietly, logically, and with devastating precision. Records compiled by the Adeptus Administratum and reviewed by the Adeptus Mechanicus describe the Tau Empire as an anomaly in the galactic landscape, a civilization progressing along a rational structured vector without the typical decay, stagnation or fanaticism seen in most known Xenos cultures. Administratum analysts classify the Tau as a mid-tier stellar power, exhibiting unusually stable socio-economic logistics and sustained exponential technological growth. Mechanicus data collations further confirm that their manufacturing efficiency and energy conversion ratios exceed Imperial norms by significant margins in almost every comparable category. The earliest confirmed Administratum entries originate from exploratory fleets operating in the Eastern Fringe. These reports identified multiple star systems exhibiting consistent energy readings of artificial origin, though lacking warp interference patterns common to Imperial civilization. The absence of warp infrastructure initially led to the conclusion that these signals came from primitive outposts. Decades later, Mechanicus Auspex recalibrations revealed intersystem transit occurring via conventional propulsion, with no detectable Geller fields or warp-wake signatures. Such findings were considered a scientific impossibility by standard Imperial metrics, yet the Tau had achieved interstellar expansion entirely without warp travel. Mechanicus data repositories mark this achievement as a statistical anomaly. Calculations suggest that, given their known age as a starfaring species, estimated at roughly 6 millennia, their rate of technological advancement rivals early human pre-Imperial epochs. Within that span, they progressed from atmospheric flight to sustained extraplanetary colonization, automated industry, and precision warfare. Administratum analysts theorize that this acceleration may be linked to species-wide coordination under their caste system, which allows specialization without internal ideological conflict. Logistical examination of Tau industrial output shows remarkable centralization. Their primary Forge World equivalent Tau functions simultaneously as a political, military, and manufacturing hub. The Adeptus Mechanicus identifies the planet's orbital structure as a synchronized chain of production rings and docking stations. Each facility maintains continuous resource cycling with minimal material wastage. Administratum shipping calculations estimate that 92% of all materials extracted within Tau space are recycled through closed system supply chains. By comparison, even the most efficient Imperial Forge worlds average 68%, making Tau logistics one of the most optimized known systems beyond the Imperium. Further analytical breakdowns indicate that the Tau have achieved balance between automation and biological oversight. Their Earth Caste, responsible for engineering and production, maintains direct operational control over mechanized facilities rather than delegating entirely to artificial constructs. Mechanicus observers interpret this as an attempt to retain a measure of human-like intuition in their design process, preventing the systemic stagnation often associated with total mechanization. This deliberate interdependence between organic and mechanical labor presents a model of production efficiency the Mechanicus regards with both fascination and quiet disapproval, as it contradicts the dogma of the Omnissiah. Administratum sociologists categorize the Tau population as a cooperative hierarchy rather than a tyranny. Census data acquired through captured communications and intercepted transmissions indicate that labor distribution follows caste assignment without resistance. There are no recorded large-scale revolts or civil uprisings within the Tau Empire. This has been interpreted not as suppression, but as successful social engineering. Each citizen appears conditioned to derive purpose from their caste function. Mechanicus neuroanalysts propose that such compliance could be the result of subtle chemical or pheromonal influence exerted by the Ethereal caste, whose presence correlates with increased worker efficiency and reduced intercaste conflict. This phenomenon remains unverified, as all biological samples of Ethereals recovered by Imperial sources have been either destroyed in containment or decayed prior to study. Administratum field reports further note the Tau's logistical capacity to maintain rapid planetary integration. Once a world joins the Empire, either voluntarily or through limited military action, It is incorporated into the Tau supply network within one local year. Agricultural data, energy output, and population control are standardized immediately through imported technology. The Mechanicus compares this process to a data upload, wherein the new colony is reprogrammed to align with Tau doctrine of the greater good. For the Administratum, this efficiency is viewed as both admirable and dangerous. It represents a political mechanism capable of converting entire planetary systems faster than most Imperial compliance campaigns. Mechanicus energy audits estimate that Tau power grids operate at an average conversion efficiency of 81%, well above Imperial plasma reactor norms, which fluctuate between 60 and 75%. The Mechanicus attributes this to superior magnetic containment geometries and higher-grade superconductive materials. Their plasma weaponry operates at lower temperatures yet delivers equal or greater kinetic output than Imperial analogues. This efficiency extends to vehicle propulsion. Anti-gravity drives on hammerhead tanks and devilfish transports demonstrate negligible loss over repeated use cycles. Maintenance protocols appear modular and self-regulating, minimizing mechanical failure rates. From a logistical standpoint, Tau fleets present a consistent pattern of redundancy and control. Administratum records show that their military expeditions are always supported by secondary supply convoys. Unarmed, but capable of immediate battlefield resupply, these convoys employ drone-operated cargo systems requiring no human oversight. Such logistics allow Tau forces to sustain operations far longer than Imperial equivalents of similar scale. Mechanicus projection models suggest that the Tau's ability to maintain consistent energy flow and material throughput is the key factor behind their rapid military recoveries following major conflicts, such as the Damocles Gulf campaign. Adeptus Mechanicus research teams that have analysed captured Tau technology describe a complete absence of religious or ritualistic engineering practices. There are no machine spirits, no rites of activation, and no evidence of binary prayer networks. Instead, every device is designed for function first, with standardization as the core principle. This ideological separation between machine and mysticism has made reverse engineering their devices problematic. Without ritual context, Mechanicus adepts find Tau technology unsettlingly clean, machines that simply obey without spirit or sanctity. This lack of the divine is officially cited as soulless utility, though some magi have privately admitted admiration for its efficiency. Administratum Financial Analytics classify the Tau economic model as a post-scarcity network economy, meaning production and consumption are balanced through constant data feedback rather than monetary exchange. The Mechanicus verified this through captured data cores from the Nimbosa system, indicating that resource allocation across colonies is algorithmically optimized. No caste or settlement appears capable of accumulating wealth beyond its assigned threshold. The result is an economy immune to corruption by individual greed, though the system relies heavily on absolute trust in central control, specifically the ethereal leadership. In logistics, the Tau display mastery of modular engineering. Mechanicus documentation on their starships and ground vehicles highlights a near-universal pattern of interchangeable components. Energy cores, grav plates, sensor modules, and even armor plating are standardized across multiple vehicle types. This allows for field-level repairs without the need for specialized forge facilities. By contrast, the Imperium's segmented pattern systems often require unique fabrication rights for each vehicle class. Administratum logisticians estimate that this modularity grants the Tau a 30% reduction in maintenance downtime per campaign. Another aspect of interest to the Mechanicus is the Tau's integration of machine intelligence. While their drones are not truly sentient, they operate with sufficient autonomy to perform battlefield logistics, reconnaissance, and industrial supervision. Unlike Imperial servitors, biomechanical hybrids enslaved by lobotomization, Tau drones are constructed entities driven by coded directives. The absence of organic suffering in their labor systems is considered heretical under Mechanicus doctrine, yet the analytical consensus is that the method is undeniably more efficient. Administratum archivists studying Tau colonization patterns note their precision in resource management. Their colonies are designed in concentric efficiency rings, outer agricultural zones, mid-tier industrial districts, and central administrative hubs. Each zone functions as both a defense layer and a self-sustaining production node. Mechanicus simulations show that these layouts minimize energy transmission loss and optimize defensive coverage. Such efficiency explains how the Tau maintain planetary order with relatively small garrisons. Each colony operates as an interlocking circuit rather than an empire ruled by fear. From a logistical analytics standpoint, the Tau's greatest advantage lies in information control. Administratum intelligence intercepts confirm that their command networks utilize subspace transmissions that are encrypted beyond Mechanicus decryption capabilities. These communications display near-zero latency within Tau-controlled space, suggesting the use of an unknown medium, possibly quantum entanglement or a parallel energy spectrum. While the Mechanicus officially denies such possibilities, classified commentary acknowledges that the Tau possess communication technologies surpassing the Imperium's astrotelepathic systems in reliability, though not in range. Adeptus Mechanicus bioanalysts have also observed the Tau's population management as a form of social logistics. Birth rates, education levels, and caste distribution are all regulated to maintain systemic balance. There is no evidence of poverty or starvation within their empire. However, there is equally no evidence of personal freedom beyond one's assigned function. Administratum evaluators describe this as a stable, totalitarian harmony, an empire that does not enslave its citizens but instead programs them into willing service. Joint Adeptus Administratum and Mechanicus evaluations conclude that the Tau Empire's logistical success is the direct result of ideology fused with infrastructure. The greater good functions not merely as a moral code but as a mathematical framework guiding production, distribution, and warfare. Every calculation, be it industrial, agricultural, or military, exists as a fraction of this collective formula. The Administratum regards this as a dangerous precedent, a civilization where belief and logic are indistinguishable. The Adeptus Mechanicus, in turn, treats the Tau with an unusual mixture of disdain and professional curiosity. Their rejection of ritual machine worship is viewed as blasphemy, yet their engineering mastery cannot be denied. Official Mechanicus stance classifies Tau technology as xenos heresy exhibiting high mechanical purity. The Administratum, more pragmatic in assessment, views the Tau Empire as a functioning model of what humanity might have achieved without the corruption of the warp. To the Imperium, the Tau represent an uncomfortable reflection. Not a threat of power, but a threat of example. Their empire endures not through faith or fear, but through coordination, balance, and reason. For the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Tau are a paradox, a species that understands the machine, yet denies its spirit. For the Adeptus Administratum, they are an anomaly in the galactic equation, an organized civilization that appears, by all measurable data, to function without chaos. Records from the Adeptus Administratum concerning the Tau Empire's military engagements reveal an unusual consistency in their approach to warfare: precision, coordination, and technological optimization. Their conflicts, when mapped chronologically, display a civilization learning and adapting at a rate that challenges all conventional Imperial projections. What was once regarded as a minor Xenos presence in a remote sector of the Eastern Fringe evolved within a few millennia into a unified empire whose military doctrines rival Imperial Guard regiments in organization, and in certain instances exceed them in tactical ingenuity. The first encounters logged by Imperial survey fleets were classified as low-threat anomalies. Early pick feeds showed small settlements defended by aircraft, and vehicles emitting plasma signatures far below Mechanicus standards of power density. These findings led to dismissive reports filed under Non-Imperial Civilization, Minimal Concern. Such assessments would later be recognized as one of the Administratum's gravest underestimations within that sector. The earliest major conflict on record occurred during the First Sphere expansion, when the Tau began to move beyond their homeworld. Their fleets were small but disciplined, operating on mathematical precision. Each engagement emphasized minimal casualties, both friendly and hostile, suggesting an underlying cultural or ethical directive embedded in their doctrine. The Administratum recorded this as an anomaly, noting that most Xenos species, when expanding, display ruthless subjugation. The Tau, however, offered alliance or assimilation before deploying lethal force. During this era, engagements against Orc warbands and scattered human colonies were notable for the Tau's reliance on ranged combat. Their fire warrior teams maintained strict line formations and synchronized pulse rifle volleys, while crisis battle suits operated as independent strike units, providing mobility and shock potential. Adeptus Mechanicus analysts later compared this to a calculated adaptation of human combined arms theory, executed with a precision that seemed almost algorithmic. By the Second Sphere expansion, the Tau had developed a military infrastructure capable of supporting prolonged campaigns across multiple systems. It was during this period that the Imperium's first serious confrontation with the Tau occurred, the Damocles Gulf Crusade. The Administratum archives record the campaign as a large-scale attempt to curtail the Tau's growth and reassert Imperial control over human-settled systems that had joined their cause. The crusade was conducted with overwhelming manpower, regiments of the Astra Militarum, multiple Space Marine chapters, and logistical fleets coordinated through Segmentum Command. The Adeptus Mechanicus dispatched several Magos explorators to observe the Tau's use of energy-based weapons and anti-grav technology. Reports noted the efficiency of Tau plasma containment fields, achieving stable output with fewer containment coils and significantly less heat bleed. These findings were marked as technologically unorthodox but not heretical, though their potential reverse engineering was forbidden by the Ordo Xenos. During the Damocles campaign, the Imperial Fists, White Scars, and Cadian regiments spearheaded assaults on Tau-held worlds. Despite being outnumbered, the Tau's ability to coordinate battles through orbital reconnaissance and real-time command relays proved decisive. Their Pathfinder teams functioned as battlefield data nodes, relaying precise targeting information to airborne units and artillery batteries. The result was an engagement style defined not by brute strength, but by superior communication. Adeptus Mechanicus analyses described it as a distributed intelligence network, wherein every fire warrior and drone functioned as an extension of the greater strategic organism. The withdrawal of Imperial forces at the end of the Crusade was prompted not by defeat but by logistics. Warp storms had disrupted Imperial supply lines, forcing a ceasefire. Yet the outcome was clear. The Imperium had failed to destroy the Tau, and instead revealed to them the scale and strength of humanity's military reach. The Tau's rapid adaptation following the Crusade confirmed the Mechanicus theory that their empire processed military lessons at a near-computational pace. Subsequent records describe the Third Sphere expansion, led by the Ethereal Council and commanders such as Shadowsun and Farsight, as an era of unprecedented military advancement. The Administratum's intercepted transmissions indicated that the Tau had developed new classes of starships, improved railgun platforms, and orbital defense systems. Mechanicus observers noted the design of the Manta dropship as particularly significant, a single craft capable of deploying an entire armoured company while maintaining atmospheric flight stability. Their fighting style had matured into a philosophy termed Montka and Kauyon, translated loosely as the killing blow and the patient hunter. Imperial tacticians considered these doctrines alien abstractions, yet Mechanicus combat simulations confirmed their practicality. The Montka doctrine emphasized rapid decapitation strikes against high-value targets, often led by crisis battlesuits or stealth cadres. Kauyon, on the other hand, relied on deliberate misdirection, baiting enemy forces into kill zones pre-marked by drones and recon teams. The synergy between these doctrines gave the Tau a degree of strategic adaptability not common among Xenos empires. In ground warfare, the Tau displayed a notable aversion to close combat. Administratum reports attributed this to biological limitations. Tau physiology lacks the musculature and reflex speed for melee endurance compared to humans or orcs. Instead, they invested in maintaining range superiority. Fire warrior cadres coordinated through drones and command links, creating interlocking fields of pulse fire that disintegrated infantry waves before they could close the distance. Imperial officers recorded this as precision by mathematics, as though each volley were pre-calculated before engagement. The Adeptus Mechanicus also took interest in the Tau's drone warfare systems, identifying them as partially autonomous constructs guided by low-level machine intelligence. These drones handled targeting, suppression, and defense coordination. While Mechanicus observers debated their degree of self-awareness, none could deny their effectiveness. A single Tau fire line supported by drones could match the fire output of multiple Imperial squads, while maintaining tighter coordination. During the Gulf conflicts that followed, several encounters demonstrated the Tau's ability to counter Imperial armor. The Mechanicus logged multiple incidents of hammerhead tanks destroying Lehman Russ formations from ranges exceeding conventional engagement limits. The railgun system, capable of penetrating multiple layers of ceramite and adamantium plating, was described as energy-efficient annihilation. What intrigued Mechanicus analysts was not the weapon's raw power, but its design simplicity, a linear accelerator operating within idealized tolerances, easily maintained and mass-produced. The Damocles Gulf Crusade represents the first formal military confrontation between the Imperium and the Tau. Initiated by Imperial High Command during the 742nd year of the 41st millennium, the Crusade aimed to crush the growing Xenos' presence near the Damocles Gulf and reclaim Imperial worlds lost to Tau expansion. What the Imperium expected to be a swift purgation instead evolved into a study of shockingly effective Xenos coordination. Imperial forces, though vastly superior in manpower and tonnage, found themselves stymied by precision strikes, advanced sensor countermeasures, and mobile warfare unseen in typical frontier campaigns. The Tau utilized terrain, atmosphere, and electronic warfare to nullify the Imperium's technological and numerical advantages. In one recorded engagement, the armoured companies of the Cadian 72nd were reduced to slag within minutes by XV-88 broadside units operating from concealed mountain emplacements, guided by invisible drone swarms and orbital marker lights. Commander Shadowsun herself would later direct the counter-offensive that forced the Imperial advance to a halt. The conflict ultimately ended in a stalemate, with both sides withdrawing due to larger strategic concerns. However, the Administratum archives note that this encounter marked the first time Imperial analysts considered the Tau a credible long-term threat. The Arcanasha campaign, led by the young Chazoviorla Chauva Caesmontier, later known as Commander Farsight, provides another key example. During this campaign, the Tau faced a coalition of Orc warbands entrenched across desert plateaus. Despite being outnumbered, Farsight applied Puretide's Montica philosophy to near perfection. Utilizing mobile battlesuit cadres, rapid redeployment via Manta dropships, and pre-synchronized airstrikes, he dismantled Orc formations before they could consolidate. His precise use of terrain, tempo, and fire discipline transformed what might have been a desperate defense into a clinical demonstration of Tau warfare. The campaign remains deeply studied among Fire Caste academies, not only for its tactical brilliance, but for the seeds of Farsight's eventual ideological divergence. Another pivotal engagement, the Kelshan defense, saw the Tau withstand an Imperial counter-crusade aimed at reclaiming the strategically vital Kelshan Sept. Shadowsun once again commanded the defense, implementing a masterful Kauyon maneuver, allowing Imperial forces to overextend into what appeared to be a retreating Tau defense line. Once the Imperial regiments had advanced deep into Kelshan's equatorial plains, the concealed Tau reserves launched coordinated flanking maneuvers, collapsing both wings of the human advance. Within 3 solar cycles, the Imperial Guard formations were broken and forced into retreat under withering precision fire. The Adeptus Mechanicus later noted the overwhelming efficiency of the Tau's logistics chain, allowing sustained drone resupply and near-continuous munitions delivery through orbital relay. From a doctrinal perspective, Tau warfare is designed around minimizing direct attrition. Unlike the Imperial Guard, which expects catastrophic losses as standard, the Tau measure success by preservation of life and infrastructure. To this end, they prefer surgical strikes, air superiority, and the neutralization of enemy leadership. Their reliance on networked warfare, particularly through drones and AI-assisted target acquisition, grants them a level of battlefield awareness few Imperial commanders can match. However, this same reliance introduces vulnerabilities. Disruption of command, uplinks, or drone swarms often results in sudden paralysis of entire Tau formations, a flaw Imperial tacticians have exploited in later campaigns. As their empire grew, so too did their tactical confidence. In the fourth expansion, Tau commanders employed large-scale orbital insertions combined with simultaneous system-wide assaults. Administratum records reveal that they treated wars not as singular battles but as interconnected algorithms, each engagement part of a broader data-driven model predicting enemy reaction and outcome. Imperial military scholars compared this to predictive machine logic, though such computational precision in a biological species remains unconfirmed. However, not all Tau campaigns were successful. The Mechanicus archives recount the Arthas Molo campaign, during which the Tau suffered catastrophic losses against the Death Corps of Krieg. Their logistical efficiency could not compensate for prolonged attrition warfare. Their doctrines faltered under siege conditions, revealing a critical weakness. The Tau's reliance on coordination and mobility collapses when forced into static defense. Mechanicus field reports marked this as a biological incompatibility with prolonged duress, suggesting that the Tau psyche struggles under conditions of stagnation and despair, concepts foreign to their collective optimism. Despite this, even their defeats served as lessons. The Fourth Sphere expansion, partially lost to warp anomalies, introduced the Imperium to the Tau Empire's fragmented successors, isolated enclaves that had been cut off and evolved independently. Administratum files indicate increased aggression among these offshoots, particularly the Farsight enclaves, who adopted more pragmatic and violent methods, abandoning the pacifist tone of the Ethereals. The Mechanicus interpreted this as evidence of internal instability, a fracture in the collective will of the Tau species. Throughout these wars, one consistent pattern emerges. The Tau prioritize efficiency over glory, precision over zeal. Where the Imperium wages holy wars, the Tau wage calculated expansions. Where humanity relies on faith, the Tau rely on data. And yet, within Mechanicus circles a quiet respect persists, an acknowledgement that the Tau embody a form of progress long forbidden to mankind. The Administratum concludes that their empire remains young but highly adaptive. Their wars are not fueled by hatred or conquest, but by a statistical pursuit of order. The Adeptus Mechanicus regards them with guarded curiosity, categorizing their military evolution as a model of convergent logic. Should their understanding of the warp ever deepen, their empire may one day transcend its current limitations. For now, the Tau remain a species that fights not to destroy, but to perfect. The aftermath of the first major conflicts between the Imperium and the Tau revealed details that neither the Adeptus Administratum nor the Adeptus Mechanicus could easily reconcile. When the Imperial Crusade fleets withdrew from the Damocles Gulf, they left behind more than wreckage. They left data, records, and impressions that did not fit the established parameters of Xenos warfare. The recovery teams that followed catalogued everything: atmospheric readings, material samples, drone fragments, human testimonies, and planetary metrics. Together they formed a picture of a civilization that did not behave as the Imperium expected it to. The earliest field audits reported abnormally low civilian casualty rates. Hab blocks remained intact, supply chains continued to function, and communication lines were swiftly restored. Agricultural and manufacturing systems showed minimal degradation, with some even exceeding pre-conflict outputs within months. For the Administratum, such outcomes contradicted every projection of war damage. The numbers indicated order rather than devastation. Entire populations had survived, adapted, and resumed productivity under Tau occupation. This outcome, though strategically advantageous for humanity's survival, was politically and ideologically unacceptable. It challenged the narrative that all Xenos brought ruin. The Adeptus Mechanicus conducted parallel evaluations across the abandoned battlefields. Their concern was not population but technology. Across the scorched plains and shattered outposts, the remains of Tau constructs lay scattered. Vehicles reduced to melted frames, drones half intact, suits of armor fused with their internal systems. Recovery teams disassembled what fragments they could, seeking evidence of warp taint or forbidden machine intelligence. What they found instead was precision without divinity. The systems were clean, efficient, and logical in design. Circuits layered in patterns of adaptive logic operated with no trace of the machine spirit. Weaponry displayed consistent plasma stability without the sacred inscriptions that the Mechanicus considered essential to safe operation. In every examined artifact, there was an absence of ritual. The machines obeyed their functions without blessing or invocation. To the priests of Mars, this was both heretical and profoundly unsettling. They had long taught that technology required worship to operate, yet here was an entire civilization that had proven otherwise. Some Mechanicus observers attempted to explain this by labeling Tau machinery as lesser, soulless, or artificially constrained, but the performance records gathered during combat operations disproved that assumption. Their systems functioned flawlessly under battlefield duress, maintained precision under heat, and displayed self-regulating properties without signs of corruption or entropy. The Administratum's evaluators focused instead on logistical data. Their analysis mapped the Tau Empire's expansion rate, population density, and planetary resource allocation. What emerged was an ecosystem of efficiency. Every sept, colony, and outpost operated under synchronized governance. Material flows were balanced between military and civilian use, and production quotas were met without the need for forced labor. This stability extended even to conquered human worlds. Infrastructure was absorbed, not dismantled. Local labor was retrained rather than enslaved. Compliance was achieved through persuasion, not terror. Administratum scribes who reviewed these reports noted the pattern repeatedly. Worlds prospered under Tau oversight. The findings were immediately sealed under restricted classification, for the data implied a truth the Imperium could never admit, that another species governed better. The Mechanicus's concluding review of recovered materials identified no trace of psychic resonance. Their starships navigated without the warp. Their weapons fired without the aid of machine spirits. Their drones operated on independent control networks that adapted autonomously to interference. Such precision, achieved without invocation of the divine or reliance on the warp, positioned the Tau as a technical paradox. Their empire functioned as though insulated from the flaws that defined the rest of the galaxy. They had built stability where humanity built control. As the years progressed, more post-conflict analyses were conducted. Each new campaign yielded similar results. The Tau's approach to war remained constant, measured, deliberate, and strategically conservative. They struck only when necessary, disengaged when risk outweighed gain, and preferred containment to destruction. They treated war as a logistical exercise rather than an act of faith or vengeance. Their command structure displayed consistency that Imperial tacticians could not replicate. When Imperial regiments reported on Tau operations, they described coordination between air and ground assets with almost mechanical precision. Every engagement suggested that the Tau viewed battle as an equation to be solved, not a spectacle to be won. Administratum reports classified the outcome of the Damocles and Kelshan conflicts as operational defeats, offset by strategic stalemate. Yet behind closed documentation, the numbers told a different story. The Tau had expanded further after each engagement, recovering faster than the Imperium and sustaining minimal long-term losses. Their empire advanced slowly, but without collapse. Where the Imperium gained through conquest and suffered through decay, the Tau advanced through consistency. The Administratum recognized the long-term risk this represented. An empire that did not burn itself out could endure indefinitely. By the late 41st millennium, the Adeptus Mechanicus compiled a unified assessment from its various data threads. The Tau were categorized as a developing technological civilization approaching industrial parity with the lesser forge worlds. Their machines were judged clean but heretical, their logic pure but soulless. They represented an intellectual heresy rather than a physical one. The Mechanicus predicted that, given time, the Tau would achieve self-sufficient mechanized production, surpassing the capabilities of most frontier Imperial worlds. That projection was redacted from all official communiques before dissemination. The priesthood could not permit acknowledgement that such a possibility existed. For the administratum, the conclusions were equally uncomfortable. Their audits of Tau-controlled systems displayed social harmony unseen in human domains. Productivity levels were stable, birth rates balanced, and insurgencies minimal. Tax-equivalent metrics surpassed Imperial standards even under partial compliance models. The data, in its raw form, portrayed a civilization that had achieved order through logic and cooperation rather than coercion. Within the administratum, these reports were reviewed, then quietly sealed. To distribute them was to question Imperial truth. By the close of the assessment period, both institutions arrived at similar unspoken conclusions. The Tau represented a type of threat the Imperium was unprepared to confront. They were not driven by chaos, nor by raw conquest, nor by psychic manipulation. They were driven by structure, reason, and collective purpose. Their strength was not in numbers but in coherence. Their weakness lay only in their scale and in the limits of their technology. They lacked the warp navigation to spread unchecked, but within their reach, they built perfection. The Mechanicus labelled their condition as the paradox of purity, a machine that functions flawlessly yet knows nothing of divinity. The administratum labelled it the harmony threat, a society too stable to fail. Both designations remained confined to sealed archives. Officially, the Tau remained a minor Xenos empire of limited concern. Unofficially, they were observed with vigilance. Their victories were not marked by devastation but by assimilation. Their wars ended not in ruins but in reconstruction. Their ideology spread not by fire but by order. The final collective evaluation, closed under joint signature between the Adeptus Administratum and the Adeptus Mechanicus, concluded that the Tau Empire's danger did not lie in its armies or weapons, but in its demonstration that faith was not required for progress. The Tau proved that civilization could thrive through cooperation and rationality alone. To the Imperium, such proof was intolerable. The Administratum buried the data under sealed codices, and the Mechanicus purged their raw findings under the pretense of compliance. Yet both continued their surveillance. Neither could ignore the possibility that the Tau, in their quiet efficiency, had uncovered the one thing the Imperium had long forgotten: how to build a future without destroying it. And so the archives close with silence. The Administratum returned to its calculations. The Mechanicus returned to its prayers. The Tau continued to expand. Each faction understood the other's inevitability. The Imperium would endure through faith. The Tau would endure through reason. Between them lay the quiet war of progress against belief, a conflict fought not with weapons, but with proof. Recovered data from inquisitorial fragments across multiple sectors referenced the Tau as both anomaly and inevitability. When first encountered, their technological ascent was viewed as improbable. Their rise occurred over a fraction of time compared to human history. Administratum estimates suggest less than 6,000 standard years from primitive metallurgy to interstellar travel. The Inquisition's initial position classified the Tau Empire as an emergent Xenos polity of low threat potential, but successive observations contradicted this early dismissal. Internal memoranda within the Ordo Xenos contain conflicting evaluations, some labelling them as benign reformists of logic and progress, others as silent catalysts for systemic instability within the Imperium's border sectors. Field investigators noted that their societies function with an efficiency nearly antithetical to the human condition. Civil unrest is almost non-existent, crime rates minimal, and adherence to the Ethereal caste is absolute. records indicate no documented uprisings against ethereal authority, leading some inquisitorial scholars to question whether their obedience is organic or chemically induced. Numerous autopsy reports on deceased Tau reveal glandular irregularities in Ethereals absent in other castes, potentially linked to neurochemical influence. Some claim it is an evolved biological control mechanism, others insist it may be a form of pheromonal conditioning. The Mechanicus refused to release full genetic scans, citing restricted biosanctum protocols. The first confirmed inquisitorial engagement with the Tau occurred during the late stages of the Damocles Gulf campaign. Multiple agents embedded with Imperial Guard regiments recorded unorthodox combat behaviour. The Tau refrained from total annihilation tactics, choosing instead to disable, subdue, or rout enemy forces rather than exterminate them. Post-battle inspection of abandoned war zones revealed extensive medical tents left intact, containing human casualties stabilized rather than slain. Such conduct was interpreted as an attempt to coerce loyalty through mercy. Others within the Ordo considered it a manipulative strategy, a calculated form of psychological warfare disguised as benevolence. Orbital reconnaissance data from Adeptus Mechanicus probes detailed remarkable logistical organization across Tau campaigns. Munitions, armor and supply convoys moved with synchronous precision, powered by drone networks and sub-command artificial intelligences operating at near-human tactical reasoning. The Inquisition noted these constructs functioned autonomously, but were limited by strict programming barriers, suggesting the Tau possessed knowledge of machine intelligence, yet enforce rigid control to prevent rebellion. One dossier, compiled by Magos Biology's Harvan Lort, proposed that the Tau had achieved a form of technological equilibrium, where progress is guided collectively rather than driven by individual innovation. This observation caused unease among Ordo Machinum observers who viewed it as a heretical harmony between logic and obedience. Reports collected from infiltration teams describe cities devoid of visible poverty. Each citizen performs a function aligned to their caste. Entire urban blocks are dedicated to communal activity rather than private ownership. The architectural design lacks ornamentation, built purely for efficiency, illumination, and air purity. To the Inquisition, this orderliness appeared unnatural. Some agents remarked on the eerie tranquility of Tau worlds, describing them as perfect to a fault. Audio logs contain remarks from a surviving operative on Dalith Prime stating that every citizen smiled the same way. The statement was flagged as possible evidence of indoctrination or chemical mood regulation embedded within their diet or atmosphere. Samples retrieved from water and air processors contained unidentified nanoscopic particulates. Adeptus Mechanicus analysis concluded they were benign environmental regulators, but Ordo Xenos archivists maintained reservations. The Inquisition has long been divided regarding the true nature of the Tau Ethereal caste. One faction believes them to be merely administrative leaders selected for intellect and empathy. Another faction, led by Inquisitor Thasian Rule of the Order Xenos, claimed they emit an electromagnetic resonance affecting subordinate castes. His research vessel, Apex Concordia, vanished 3 weeks after transmitting partial findings regarding resonance readings detected within ethereal command chambers. The data was encrypted, and no subsequent transmissions were received. The report was sealed under Ordo Red classification, indicating information potentially disruptive to Imperial stability. Unexplainable occurrences are frequent in inquisitorial encounters with Tau. Psycho observations during interrogation of captured Tau officers yielded strange results. Attempts to scan or penetrate their mental structures often resulted in disorientation or fainting. One sanctioned psyker described the Tau mind as quiet, as if insulated from the warp. This characteristic reinforced the hypothesis that the Tau species possesses minimal to no warp sensitivity, explaining their lack of psychic manifestations. However, the same quality rendered them invisible to demonic influence. This immunity unsettled the Ordo Malleus, whose scholars considered them anomalous in a galaxy so intrinsically bound to the immaterium. Some speculated that the species' existence could represent a form of evolutionary divergence. life progressing beyond warp dependence. Others dismissed this as an irrelevant coincidence born of genetic accident. The Adeptus Mechanicus also reported untraceable signals emanating from Tau deep space communication relays. These transmissions, modulated in shifting pulse patterns, were indecipherable despite extensive decryption attempts. What alarmed the observers was the frequency overlap with Mechanicus data channels, suggesting either deliberate mimicry or an uncanny natural synchronization. Explorator fleets stationed near the Damocles border later documented sensor malfunctions and corrupted noospheric data during Tau fleet movements. The distortions ceased upon withdrawal of Tau vessels, furthering suspicions of deliberate interference. Further confusion arose during the cataloguing of abandoned Tau colonies on fringe worlds. Some appeared vacated overnight. Infrastructure remained operational, food production automated, yet every inhabitant had vanished without trace. Administratum follow-up found no signs of evacuation or conflict. Theories range from sudden relocation protocols to experimental phase-shifting transport. Inquisitorial units who entered these zones reported auditory hallucinations and mild disorientation. One team described mechanical droning beneath the soil, but excavations revealed no machinery. The findings were later classified as environmental resonance anomalies, though some reports suggest the Inquisition may have intentionally suppressed further inquiry. Among the more peculiar incidents documented involved encounters with Tau explorers in regions beyond known warp routes. These individuals appeared to operate independently of the Empire, carrying modified technologies not observed in conventional Tau design. Their starships lacked recognizable serial markings and utilized stealth drives of unknown origin. They referred to themselves as Pathfinders of the Second Expansion. Despite no record of such designation existing in Tau archives, Inquisitors theorize they may represent breakaway factions experimenting with forbidden technologies or early colonization attempts that diverged from the Ethereals' oversight. None of these individuals were ever successfully interrogated, all self-terminated upon capture through cranial microdetonation implants. The Inquisition's compiled assessment of the Tau remains inconclusive. The Ordo Xenos views them as a growing concern capable of reshaping border sectors through ideology rather than conquest. The Ordo Hereticus fears their example may inspire rebellion among Imperial citizens seeking rational governance over faith. The Ordo Malleus finds them anomalous, an aberration existing beyond the warp's influence and therefore outside established parameters of damnation or salvation. Collectively, these views paint the Tau not as a simple Xenos threat, but as an existential puzzle, the manifestation of order without devotion, logic without corruption, progress without faith. What remains unexplained, even after centuries of study, is their acceleration. No other species has advanced so rapidly without external intervention. The Adeptus Mechanicus denies any shared lineage or technology exchange, yet some Inquisitors quietly argue otherwise. The precision of Tau design, the structural mathematics behind their anti-gravitic systems, and their familiarity with material harmonics suggest a guiding intelligence. Whether this influence is internal evolution, rediscovered technology, or foreign tutelage remains unproven. The records end with a simple annotation within Inquisitorial Archive 41 Delta. The Tau Empire stands as proof that order may thrive without faith. That alone may be their greatest heresy. Within the Inquisition's sealed records, the wars involving the Tau Empire are notable not merely for their precision, but for their inexplicable inconsistencies. Official data from the Adeptus Administratum lists multiple campaigns where tactical analysis fails to align with physical aftermath. Engagement zones often show evidence of battles that could not have been fought by the recorded number of participants. Weapon discharge patterns, ordnance residue, and casualty ratios defy established calculations. It is as though portions of these conflicts occurred outside observable parameters. Adeptus Mechanicus observers refer to these inconsistencies as temporal discontinuities, though the term remains unofficial due to the absence of warp phenomena within Tau operational signatures. The earliest anomaly on record originates from the Damocles Gulf Crusade. Several Imperial Guard regiments reported sudden communication blackouts lasting minutes during active combat. Upon restoration, entire forward units had vanished without trace. Surveillance pic feeds recorded static interference moments before disappearance, followed by the sudden presence of Tau armor divisions in locations previously unoccupied. Administratum analysts initially attributed this to coordinated flanking maneuvers, but subsequent cross-reference with terrain data revealed no viable routes for such repositioning. Theories suggest localized teleportation or short-range dimensional phasing, yet neither technology has been confirmed in Tau inventory. Mechanicus' examination of captured Tau transports found no evidence of warp-based movement. Instead, residual readings of subatomic gravitic modulation hinted at something different: manipulation of space-time curvature at micro level, possibly derived from stabilized pulse fields. The implications of such technology were deemed too disruptive to circulate beyond Ordo-Xenos channels. A later campaign on the world of Mugalath Bay introduced further discrepancies. Vox intercepts captured by Imperial Navy vessels contained echoes of identical messages repeated seconds apart, transmitted from separate Tau ships at impossible distances. Navy auger technicians observed signal reflections behaving as if routed through an invisible network of artificial satellites. No such structures were detected. When the Imperial fleet attempted to triangulate these phantom nodes, targeting systems malfunctioned, registering coordinates that led into planetary crust rather than orbit. Following the battle, several vessels reported mild chronometric drift in their chronometers, each deviating by precisely the same duration, 6.2 seconds. This uniform anomaly led the Adeptus Mechanicus to hypothesize a large-scale field distortion surrounding the Tau fleet, though the mechanism remains unverified. Field accounts from the Zeist expansion further compound the mystery. Several Deathwatch kill teams embedded within the theatre recorded engagements with Tau forces that displayed near-prescient coordination. Enemy units reacted to ambushes seconds before they occurred, avoiding traps with near-perfect timing. The Inquisition initially suspected data leaks within the Imperial network, but encryption integrity was later confirmed. One after-action report referenced ghost signals within the Vox spectrum, brief bursts of data packets resembling tactical feeds transmitted backward in time. Though dismissed as interference, the consistency of these occurrences across multiple engagements raised suspicion that the Tau command structure may utilize predictive algorithms far beyond known computation limits. Magos Strategos Renland theorized a form of real-time probability mapping, using thousands of autonomous drones to simulate outcomes milliseconds ahead. This would grant the illusion of foresight while relying purely on mathematical prediction. Whether such systems could process that volume of data remains uncertain. The Inquisition archives also include several sealed reports concerning the disappearance of entire task forces following encounters with the Tau. One notable instance involves the disappearance of the St. Olvar Nime Expeditionary Detachment. During the Fourth Sphere expansion, Imperial long-range monitors detected their approach toward the contested Sept world of Psylocke. The fleet transmitted a standard engagement confirmation. 2 hours later, all signals ceased. Months afterward, fragments of hull debris were discovered in a parallel orbital band 300 kilometers higher than expected. The wreckage bore no signs of impact or weapon fire. Every surface exhibited smooth molecular degradation, as though the metal had been slowly erased. The Mechanicus attributed this to exotic energy fields. The Inquisition, however, quietly speculated that the Tau may have tested a form of spatial weaponry or containment barrier capable of molecular disassembly. The report remains sealed under magenta-level restriction, with cross-reference links redacted. Another anomaly occurred during the conflict on the fringe world of Nimbosa. Reports from Astra Militarum survivors detail the sudden manifestation of Tau heavy armor units in enclosed urban sectors where no entry points existed. These appearances were instantaneous, observed visually by multiple witnesses. No teleportation flashes or gravitational distortions were recorded. Auspex data simply logged the vehicles as having appeared between consecutive scans. Some within the Inquisition proposed the presence of cloaking systems capable of bending light and sensor detection. Yet Mechanicus teams dispatched post-battle found no trace of such technology. The only consistent pattern was the emission of low-frequency electromagnetic pulses moments before each manifestation. The pulses themselves carried encoded data of unknown format, possibly functioning as activation sequences for local phase relays. If confirmed, it would imply that Tau tactical deployment can occur within layered space, manifesting entire divisions through dimensional compression fields without reliance on warp energy. The potential for this to reshape warfare has led to the permanent classification of the Nimbosa incident as restricted research territory. Further investigation into the Farsight enclaves revealed sealed dossiers indicating unrecorded Tau skirmishes along uncharted systems near the eastern fringe. These events were first brought to attention when inquisitorial patrol ships discovered derelict Tau craft orbiting lifeless moons. Data logs within these ships contained corrupted timestamps extending centuries beyond the current date. The vessels appeared operationally pristine, but their crews were missing. Air circulation systems and power cores remained active, with recent maintenance evident. The incongruity of time and decay suggested temporal displacement. Attempts to analyze onboard computers resulted in recursive data loops referencing non-existent star coordinates. After several weeks, the derelicts vanished from their holding docks without detectable energy discharge. The Inquisition ordered the erasure of all related data under the classification Reality Instability, Potential Causality Breach. Eyewitness accounts from Imperial prisoners rescued after engagements with the Tau add further confusion. Several describe battlefields that appeared to shift in geometry mid-combat, horizon lines bending subtly, distances altering between landmarks, and light dimming without environmental cause. Medical evaluation of these individuals indicated no hallucinogen exposure. The Adeptus Mechanicus attributed such perceptions to stress-induced sensory error. However, recurring consistency across testimonies, including reports of simultaneous chronometer desynchronization, points toward real spatial fluctuation. The most conservative assessment proposed the possibility of experimental weaponry creating localized gravitic distortions. Others theorized deliberate manipulation of physical constants to create strategic illusions. The Inquisition considered both explanations equally insufficient. A sealed report labelled 77 Damra refers to a classified confrontation between a black ship detachment and a Tau exploration fleet. The engagement was initiated after detection of anomalous psycho readings aboard Tau vessels, an impossibility according to established knowledge. Upon interception, Vox silence ensued. The black ship transmitted only one partial message before vanishing from the noospheric grid. The message contained the phrase, "They are speaking without sound." Debris was never recovered. The Ordo Malleus suppressed the incident, arguing it might indicate Tau experimentation with non-warp psychic analogues or advanced telepathic systems based on quantum resonance rather than immaterial projection. Such speculation remains forbidden for discussion outside sealed chambers. Among the most deeply buried records lies an account from the world of Viola, detailing an encounter with an inquisitorial reconnaissance drone that recorded impossible data. The drone's internal chronometer logged an elapsed duration of 27 hours, while external sensors marked only 3. Within this discrepancy, visual feeds displayed continuous footage of Tau engineers constructing an entire defense platform. When cross-verified, the installation already existed before the drone's launch. Inquisition analysts concluded that the recording represented a loop in local space-time or an induced simulation embedded in the drone's optical systems. The file was sealed under Order Kronos oversight. No official explanation has been issued. By the late centuries of the 41st millennium, Inquisition consensus shifted from viewing the Tau as a material threat to acknowledging them as an ontological one. Their technologies exhibit precision, but conceal mechanisms that cannot be replicated or fully understood by the Mechanicus. Their wars display patterns inconsistent with known physics, yet yield predictable outcomes. Minimal collateral, calculated surrender, sustained order. Each anomaly further reinforces the impression that the Tau operate according to principles alien to both the warp and conventional science. Their ability to project influence without psychic or demonic foundation violates the established framework of galactic reality as defined by the Imperium. The Inquisition's final evaluation concludes that the Tau Empire's conflicts represent a hybridization of physical warfare and dimensional engineering. The collective evidence implies not a mastery of the warp, but a complete circumvention of it. Their technology functions within the material plane while bending it subtly to their will. The anomalies recorded across centuries may not be errors or coincidences. They may be evidence of an alternate path of evolution, where logic alone replaced faith, and science achieved what sorcery could not. Whether by design or accident, the Tau have demonstrated that war itself can be rewritten through precision, patience, and the absence of belief. Within the sealed corridors of the inquisitorial data vaults beneath Terra, the Tau Empire is catalogued under Section X4176 of the Ordo Xenos Deep Registry. Its files are sealed by Triorder Consensus, Xenos, Malleus, and Hereticus, an uncommon measure reserved only for species or entities whose existence challenges the Imperium's foundational axioms. Access requires quintuple biometric authorization and the presence of a Mechanicus data priest versed in binary prayer locks. The earliest records date back to the Damocles Gulf encounters, but later editions reveal far deeper interest than the official history implies. What began as field reports evolved into full-spectrum surveillance spanning political, social, genetic, and metaphysical domains. The most restricted files reference internal inquisitorial disputes regarding the Tau's classification. One faction argued for their designation as a standard Xenos empire, expansionist, technologically advanced, but ultimately bound by material limits. The opposing faction, comprised of several senior lords, maintained that the Tau represent an emergent form of species-level control system, possibly synthetic in origin. This hypothesis stems from the extreme consistency of their development. Every Tau sept follows identical social patterns. No deviation, mutation, or cultural schism persists for long. Where humans fracture endlessly under faith and ideology, the Tau remain unified across entire star systems. The probability of such cohesion without psychic or divine enforcement is statistically negligible. The Inquisition's sociological analysts concluded that either their genome or their governing ethereal caste is artificially designed to maintain equilibrium. In sealed transcript 11 Theta, a captured Ethereal subjected to prolonged observation was noted to exhibit neural oscillations synchronized to a frequency that mirrored the brainwave activity of nearby Tau personnel. The synchronization occurred within a radius of 20 meters, producing subtle behavioral alignment among those present. When the Ethereal was terminated, the effect ceased immediately. Mechanicus Magi interpreted this as a biological broadcasting phenomenon, a collective consciousness operating through neurochemical resonance rather than psychic connection. The Order Malleus, however, classified the finding as anathema-neutral, meaning it bore resemblance to psychic influence, yet operated entirely outside the warp's domain. The implications unsettled several inquisitors. If verified, the Tau represent a civilization united through a form of naturalized telecommunication, an organic machine of perfect obedience. Another file labeled Delta Red 8 contains the log of Inquisitor Veren Holt. Her observations were recovered posthumously from an encrypted databank retrieved near the Jericho Reach. Her report described an ethereal council chamber located beneath a mountain complex on Daleth. The architecture was unlike any other Tau construction. Metallic walls emitted a low-frequency hum detectable even through recording equipment. In the chamber's center stood a structure resembling an obelisk constructed from a material not native to the Tau homeworld. Holt's translation servitors interpreted the inscriptions as mathematical sequences referencing stellar drift and dimensional angles. Before the data could be transmitted, all Vox signals from her team ceased. Later, orbital scans revealed the mountain's complete removal from the planetary crust, leaving a smooth circular basin of fused rock. No seismic activity was recorded. The report was marked as unverifiable due to data loss and sealed under the authority of Order Kronos oversight. Other classified sections reference incidents in which Tau fleets have appeared in regions unreachable by conventional warp travel. The Mechanicus confirmed these regions lacked stable warp currents, making navigation impossible for Imperial vessels. Yet Tau ships were detected entering and exiting these zones without apparent delay. Subsequent analysis revealed faint traces of gravitic distortion, but no warp residue. Theories emerged suggesting the Tau had developed a method of spatial traversal through folded real space, a controlled bypass rather than entry into the warp. This aligns with the increasing evidence that their technology manipulates fundamental physical constants, permitting instantaneous repositioning without psychic navigation. The discovery was buried under Ordo Malleus opposition, which deemed its dissemination too destabilizing. The existence of a race capable of interstellar travel without communion with the warp threatens not only Imperial logistics but theological dogma. In deeper layers of the Inquisition's data archives, a collection of prohibited files labeled Project Mimesis explores the possibility of parallel development between Tau technology and ancient pre-Imperial human research. Within these documents are fragmentary blueprints resembling Tau pulse weapons and gravitic engines, predating the Unification Wars. The fragments originated from vaults once belonging to the Dark Age of technology. The Ordo Machinum's custodians claim these similarities are coincidental, convergent innovation born from similar scientific logic. However, the Inquisition's counter-analysis suggests either contact with remnants of human pre-Imperial artificial intelligences or inheritance of rediscovered artifacts predating the species itself. The absence of Tau warp sensitivity may thus be a deliberate design, shielding them from the Immaterium's corruption. If true, the species could represent the continuation of a pre-heresy human experiment, humanity without the warp, resurrected in alien form. The Ordo Xenos has repeatedly requested direct genetic comparison between Tau DNA and human genome archives. The Mechanicus has consistently refused, citing the biological sanctity of the Omnissiah's creations. Still, fragments smuggled through secondary channels show alarming proximity between specific protein codons, especially those governing neural receptor regulation and cognitive dampening. These similarities fall within 1% of human variance thresholds. Whether this indicates shared ancestry or deliberate engineering remains unconfirmed. All personnel involved in the analysis were reassigned to remote postings following the discovery. None have been heard from since. Among the most controversial documents within the Inquisition's possession is a single unmarked hololith, recovered from the wreckage of a derelict exploration vessel. The recording displays a Tau command cadre standing before a massive structure suspended in orbit above an unknown world. The object emits no light, yet casts shadow upon the planetary surface. Its geometry defies perspective, shifting between circular and angular configurations depending on observation angle. Audio accompanying the feed contains no sound other than rhythmic pulses, measured at intervals identical to the neural frequency patterns observed in Ethereals. Some analysts believe it to be a communication array linking the entire species across subspace. Others claim it is an ancient relic from before the Tau's recorded history, a machine that speaks through silence. The file is labelled Origin Conjecture, Object 0, and no authorization has been granted for further study. The Inquisition's final consolidated assessment portrays the Tau Empire as an enigma that should not exist. Their civilization contradicts every known principle of galactic survival. They thrive without psychic power, without worship, without submission to the warp. Their unity is absolute yet emotionless, their progress unimpeded yet restrained by internal harmony. They neither fear nor acknowledge the Emperor, yet they function with a discipline many within the Imperium can only attempt to enforce. Some Inquisitors interpret them as a minor aberration destined to fall before the endless tide of the galaxy's chaos. Others quietly fear, that they represent the next stage of sentient evolution, reason refined into ideology, faith replaced by design, morality supplanted by order. The closing annotation within the deepest segment of the inquisitorial report carries no author's name. It is written in neutral binary script and translated into High Gothic. The message reads as follows: "They do not dream. They do not hear the warp. They walk a path parallel to our own, untouched by what damns us. Whether they were made by men, by chance, or by something beyond both, we cannot tell. The Tau Empire may not be a rival, but a mirror, reflecting what humanity could have been if faith had never replaced understanding." This entry concludes the sealed section of the Tau Empire's record. It remains under continuous monitoring by both the Ordo Xenos and the Adeptus Mechanicus, though no further physical contact has been authorized. The final order, inscribed at the end of the archive, states simply, "Observe, but do not engage. The truth of the Tau lies not in what they have built, but in what they were built to become."